Imagine waking up and seeing glowing rings in the sky every single night. If Earth had rings like Saturn, our planet would be one of the most beautiful sights in the universe. The rings would stretch thousands of kilometers wide and consist of countless pieces of ice and rock. But being this close to such a spectacle would also be quite dangerous. So let's imagine that our planet does have rings and see what would happen. You would need to find somewhere very special to watch them, because, depending on where you are on Earth, the rings would look completely different. In cities near the equator, the rings would appear as giant glowing arches across the sky. Meanwhile, in places closer to the poles, you might not see them at all. This is because the rings would orbit Earth along the equator. You can already see something similar when you watch a rocket launch from the International Space Station. As the rocket ascends, it leaves behind a trail of exhaust that forms a ring. Eventually, these rings would stretch around the entire planet. If you lived far enough away from the equator, you wouldn't notice the rings much at all, unless you looked up in the sky. But if you were living in Hawaii or Ecuador, you would need to look away when the sun set each evening. That's because as Earth rotates towards the rings, the light reflected from them would blot out the stars. It would feel as though the night sky was filled with bright daylight, which sounds magical, but there's no way we could adapt to such a drastic change. Cities near the equator would be plunged into darkness as soon as the sun set, yet it would feel more like twilight than night. Even the moon would be affected, appearing darker than usual against the bright backdrop. For months, we would experience the strangest sunsets and sunrises imaginable, with long, thin arches reflecting strange shades of orange and purple. It would feel like we were living inside a fantasy world. But how exactly would the rings form? To understand that, let's take a journey back in time. When several small, icy objects came too close to the planet and were ripped apart by its gravity, it's also possible that a comet or asteroid fragmented after hitting Saturn. However, this didn't happen on Earth, so we don't have any solid theories about how our planet's rings would form. But let's assume they did come from an asteroid. NASA scientists say that the most likely source for Earth's rings would be debris left behind from the breakup of a wayward asteroid. Or perhaps they may have originated from a comet that broke apart due to gravitational forces. Either way, these chunks of space debris would eventually settle down and form rings. There are hundreds of asteroids that pass close to Earth each year, but none are big enough to form rings around our planet. The closest passing asteroid that could potentially create rings is Apophis, which comes within 30,000 kilometers of Earth every 324 days. But although Apophis is large enough, it's unlikely to break up anytime soon. Even if it did, it's unlikely that we would notice any significant change. However, things would be very different if a wayward comet hit our planet. Comets are known for their distinctive shapes, composed of ice, dust, and rock. When a comet approaches the sun, the heat causes the ice to vaporize, leaving behind a path of debris. This is what happens when a comet passes Earth. Instead of vaporizing, however, the rocks and dust get trapped in our planet's atmosphere. Over time, this debris forms rings just like on Saturn. Comets aren't rare. There are about 5,000 comets that approach Earth every year. Most are only a few kilometers wide. Unfortunately, we haven't been hit by a large one in millions of years. But could we survive if a large comet did strike us? A new study suggests that we probably couldn't. Let's take Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 as an example. This comet is nearly 2 kilometers wide and will pass Earth in 2022, although it whoa and come dangerously close. It still poses a threat. According to the study, a comet that's just 5 million kilometers away from Earth could pose a serious threat. And if it hits us, humanity has a 30% chance of going extinct. So could we survive on Earth if it had rings like Saturn? Probably not. We've seen how a simple comet passing by Earth can threaten our survival. Now imagine if we had rings orbiting our planet. Every year, Earth would pass through a path of debris left behind by comets, meaning we would be bombarded by meteor showers. These would pose a constant threat to life as we know it. In fact, many scientists believe that the dinosaurs became extinct not because of an asteroid, but because of a series of comet impacts. Some scientists even believe that this is what caused the Ice Age. Our current extinction event started 66 million years ago when an asteroid hit our planet. But scientists believe that this wasn't the main cause of the mass extinction event. Instead, they think it was a series of comet impacts. It's thought that this is what wiped out the remaining species. It's possible that if the asteroid hadn't struck, there would have still been a mass extinction. But the asteroid may have acted as the trigger, causing the extinction to occur faster. But what if Earth did have rings? Could we somehow adapt? Perhaps we could build huge shields in the sky to protect ourselves from incoming debris, but that seems very unlikely. The truth is that Earth probably never had rings. Most of the debris would have burned up in the atmosphere long before it reached the surface. And even if some made it through, the planet's gravity would quickly disperse them. Unlike Saturn, which is 8 times larger than Earth, we simply don't have the gravity needed to keep rings in place. And what would the rings look like if they did last? According to scientists, they would be opaque and just a few hundred meters wide. The vast majority of the rings would be opaque and only a few hundred meters wide. While these rings would be visible from Earth, they would have no significant effect on our planet. And that's what would happen if Earth did have rings, like Saturn. It would be beautiful, but it would also be incredibly dangerous. How do you think we would fare if a comet hit us while we were surrounded by these rings? Let me know in the comments below. Some people say that global warming is a myth, and that we should ignore the warnings of scientists. But what if the Earth suddenly had rings like the planet Saturn? Would that affect our climate? Well, it turns out it would. Researchers at the University of Toronto used a computer model to simulate how the rings would affect the climate. They found that the rings would absorb heat from the sun and reflect it back into space, resulting in cooler temperatures on Earth. However, this wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, because the temperature changes would be unpredictable and vary depending on the location. Some parts of the world would become too cold to support life as we know it, but others would become too warm and wet. It would be complete chaos. This is because the rings would also affect rainfall patterns. In some areas, there would be so much rain that it would lead to flooding. But in others, there would be so little that crops would die and food shortages would occur. Global warming is a serious issue that we need to take action on now. But having rings like Saturn would make things worse. And this is just one of the ways that Earth's climate would be affected. If we had rings like Saturn, another would be the amount of debris that would fall to Earth. Every year, Earth would pass through a path of comet debris, which would cause widespread destruction. We would be constantly bombarded by meteor showers, which would cause massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. The planet would essentially become a war zone. It's hard to imagine how we could survive in such conditions. Many scientists believe that the dinosaurs became extinct not because of an asteroid impact, but because of a series of comet impacts. It's thought that this is what wiped out the remaining species. It's possible that if the asteroid hadn't struck, there would have still been a mass extinction. But the asteroid may have acted as the trigger, causing the extinction to occur faster. Scientists also believe that the Ice Age was caused by a series of comet impacts. But could we survive if Earth had rings? Perhaps we could build huge shields in the sky to protect ourselves from incoming debris, but that seems very unlikely. The truth is that Earth probably never had rings. Most of the debris would have burned up in the atmosphere long before it reached the surface. And even if some made it through, the planet's gravity would quickly disperse it. Unlike Saturn, which is 8 times larger than Earth, we simply don't have the gravity needed to keep rings in place. Earth's gravity is about 90% weaker than Saturn's, so we couldn't keep rings in place. Even if we did have rings, they would only last a few hundred meters wide. While these rings would be visible from Earth, they would have no significant effect on our planet. And what if Earth did have rings like Saturn? Would we want to live on it? It would be beautiful, but also incredibly dangerous. How do you think we would fare if a comet hit us while we were surrounded by these rings? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my others, where I explore the most extreme planets in the universe. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all of my future videos.